Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar titled SNAP ENT and WIOA, Partnering to Raise Skills and Employment. Note today's webinar is being recorded. If you are listening to the audio via your telephone, please make sure to mute your computer speakers to avoid an echo. There will be time for Q&A at the end of this webinar, but feel free to type in your questions in the question box anytime throughout. If you have any tech issues, feel free to send me, Tai Hong Lu, a message. You can find me under the staff section. I will now turn the webinar over to Rachel Bragg from FNS.
Thanks, Tai Hong. And thank you to everybody who is participating in the webinar today. We really appreciate your interest in SNAP ENT, and in particular, this topic of how SNAP ENT and WIOA can work together. This webinar is part of the SNAP to Skills project that FNS is doing to help states think about expanding and strengthening their SNAP ENT program to ensure that SNAP participants have access to the kinds of skill-based services and supports that they need to not just get a job, but get a good, stable job, a career that helps lead them to economic self-sufficiency and reduces their need for nutrition assistance. Those of you who are not familiar with SNAP to Skills, it's a technical assistance project, a multi-year technical assistance project that FNS is doing. You can learn more about it by going to our website, snap to skills, TOSKILLS.FNS.USDA.gov. And there's a lot of resources available, including a number of policy briefs, focusing on best practices and really ways to think about maximizing the effectiveness of SNAP ENT. Today we're going to focus, though, on how SNAP ENT and WIOA can partner to really maximize the effectiveness of both programs in serving our clients. FNS is very committed to not reinventing the wheel, let's say. We know that the strengths of SNAP agencies are helping people get access to a healthy, nutritious food, while the expertise of the WIOA system is helping people gain skills and get into meaningful employment. And the role of SNAP ENT is really to bring those two sides of the conversation together. So by thinking about ways that SNAP ENT and WIOA can work together, we really think that this is a critical partnership and core to the success of SNAP ENT. So today we're going to hear from a number of people who have started to do this work, this complicated work, and are doing it well, which hopefully will help people on the call really think about ways that your state might start thinking about bringing together SNAP ENT and WIOA. I want to just thank our speakers, Work Systems from Portland and DHS from Minnesota. They really have tackled this work. They're sort of leading the conversation in a lot of ways by figuring out how to do this. And I just appreciate their willingness to share with us today their experience trying to bring these two programs more closely, align these two programs more closely. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'll turn it over to you, Julie, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Julie Strawn with App Associates and part of the SNAP to Skills team. Today, we're going to start off with a brief overview of why it makes sense for SNAP employment and training and the workforce system to collaborate, some incentives and challenges to doing so, and then move on to spend most of our time hearing from Portland, Oregon, and Minnesota colleagues about how they've built ENT and workforce system partnerships. We'll conclude with some thoughts on how to approach those partnerships and then open it up for your questions. So why should SNAP ENT and WIOA partner in serving SNAP recipients? The most important reason is that both systems share the goal of helping low-income adults who receive SNAP to gain the skills and employment assistance needed to move toward economic self-sufficiency, and that they can do it more effectively together than alone. SNS and DOL highlighted this in the joint letter they issued in 2016, which encouraged SNAP E&T and the workforce system to collaborate on shared strategies that connect SNAP participants to employment and training services through American Job Centers. And in particular, the letter emphasized ways to provide services to able-bodied adults without dependents. So if you haven't looked at that letter, I'd encourage you to think about the message and some of the guidance it provides. So the two systems, though they have common goals, they are different and have complementary strengths. WIOA offers the flexibility to accommodate a number of different service strategies, the capacity to provide at least a modest level of service to relatively large numbers of job seekers, an understanding of local labor market, and knowledge of education, training, and support services that are available out in the community. SNAP E&T is more targeted to low-income individuals, many of whom face multiple challenges to employment. And because of that, SNAP agency staff and their E&T local partners often have a deeper knowledge how to address those barriers than do frontline AJC staff. E&T can also fund a wide array of employment training services and related expenses, including through 50-50 reimbursement partnerships with third-party organizations, which provides opportunity to leverage non-federal funds. SNAP E&T can use its resources to add value to existing workforce system activities, especially by expanding the types of services that are offered to be more comprehensive and intensive in order to address multiple barriers to sustained family-supporting employment. So what are some of the incentives to collaborate? One important incentive is that WIOA and SNAP E&T share some target populations. As an example of SNAP's able-bodied adults without dependence population helps illustrate. As you know, ABODs must work or participate in work activities to receive SNAP benefits after 3 months. From the perspective of SNAP E&T, partnering with WIOA to serve ABODs can expand the availability of work activities for them because participation in a WIOA program is a qualifying activity. From the perspective of the workforce system, changes made by WIOA mean the youth program must serve many more out-of-school youth than before. And because about 1 in 3 ABODs are young adults, partnering with E&T to serve this population can help the workforce system meet this requirement. And beyond the ABOD population, serving SNAP E&T participants generally can help the workforce system meet WIOA's requirement to give priority for employment and training services to public assistance recipients, other low-income individuals, and those with low basic skills. A second important incentive is that in a time of historically low unemployment and a tight labor market, American Job Centers are more likely to encounter job seekers with multiple barriers to employment. SNAP E&T partnerships can help AJCs address those barriers by expanding services to be more comprehensive, individualized, and intensive. Next slide. So I'll go ahead and move on while Taihang advances the slide. So there are, of course, challenges to SNAP E&T and WIOA working together. One challenge is that historically the workforce development system's performance targets really focused it on short-term employment outcomes, and that combined with limited funding relative to universal service goals created disincentives for AJCs to serve individuals viewed as less employable and needing more intensive services. Changes made to the system under WIOA, such as strengthened priority of service requirements and new credential attainment and interim skill gains measures, are intended to address some of those issues. The second challenge is that SNAP E&T programs and AJCs, if they're not careful to think strategically about collaboration, may simply wind up providing duplicative services rather than adding new or expanded services that are tailored to the SNAP population's needs. SNAP agencies have an important opportunity to align ENT and WIOA services to increase capacity to serve more disadvantaged populations and to build robust partnerships with community colleges, community-based organizations, and employers to improve outcomes. In short, what the clear message we want to convey today is that SNAP agencies should seek to really add value to what AJCs already offer in serving SNAP recipients and not duplicate existing services. I'm going to turn it over now to our colleagues in Oregon and Minnesota to share their insights on how SNAP ENT and WIOA can partner effectively to better serve their mutual clients. With us from Portland, Oregon's Work Systems, Inc. are Patrick Gearing, the Chief Program Officer, and Stacy Triplett, the Community Programs Manager. Joining us from Minnesota are Lynn Dawn with Minnesota's Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, who serves both as the SNAP ENT Program Coordinator and also as the liaison in ENT between DEED and the Department of Human Services. Also with us from Minnesota is Noah Spicer, the Director of Workforce Development for Hennepin County, which includes Minneapolis. And I want to thank all of you for taking time to be here today and to share what you've learned with your peers across the country. We'll begin with Patrick in Portland.
Thanks, Julie. Again, this is Patrick Gearing, and I'm joined by Stacy Triplett from Work Systems. We're the local workforce development board that serves the Portland metro area. Just some context, we'll be sharing our experience with the SNAP ENT grant here. We've been doing a 50-50 grant for about 2 years now. And at this point, I think we're probably the largest local workforce board run program in the nation. And Oregon is about number 3 in terms of state size for SNAP 50-50 programs. We initially got involved with SNAP 50-50 for a number of reasons. One of them is that we have a mission and focus on working with barriered populations. And as Julie mentioned, one of the considerations is the target population and performance. For us, we had some precedent and background in working with homeless, immigrants, sex offenders, and so forth. So that wasn't a barrier, but something to consider within the context of WIOA and WIOA performance. Another reason we got involved is we have an interest in increasing our relevance beyond WIOA. So we manage probably 30 different programs and funding streams at this stage, and want to do all things workforce and make them work together in complementary ways, much in the same way that Julie talked about the relationship between SNAP ENT and WIOA. So we're trying to develop a system, not just a single program, with WIOA funding being the resource behind that. Another reason is the metro area here has a really high share of food stamp recipients. We tend to swing with the economy, and so we had the very highest unemployment for a while during the recession. Now we have very, very low unemployment. We have a high share of food stamp recipients, and we're on the top of the list in the nation for a while there. I think we're in position number 3. So it's just a really large population of job seekers that need help in the metro area. So the grant was interesting to us for that reason. And finally, we wanted to diversify our resources in order to be able to create and sustain an impact in the community for helping people in career track employment. So here's some background about our WIOA-funded one-stop system that can kind of set the stage. One of the things that's unique about Oregon, and maybe a couple other states, is that we enroll everyone who wants services and are eligible. WIOA eligibility is basically you're eligible to work and you're 18 or older. So we don't go through a process of screening people out. If you come to a one-stop center and want help, you'll get that help. So we have a universal enrollment, we call it. We also don't fund WIOA case managers. So case manager used to be for us the highest item of cost in a system before we switched to this model. A lot of the responsibility of case managers center around performance management historically, although it's really good to have a relationship with a customer that works over the long haul. But we shifted the resources that went to case managers into more services, and the customers come in and access things cafeteria style. So just like a cafeteria, you walk in, you see what the menu is. If occupational training is what you're interested in, you can go into that. If a workshop is interested, if you need help finding a job, you pick and choose cafeteria style. And by shifting the resources in this way and into more of the services, we serve a lot of people in the metro area. It's probably about 50,000 people are registered and served in the one-stop system in the course of a year. That's down since the recession, but still a very high number, served across 5 workforce centers and 2 auxiliary sites. So one thing we found, we really like the model. We like being open access. If you need services, you come and we serve you. However, as most folks know, highly varied populations may need more intensive relationship-based services. And that just is a point to what Julie's talking about, is that the WIOA system is good at some things, but for serving people with multiple barriers of employment, we need to develop partnerships to provide that higher, more long-term, more relationship-based type of service. So the fancy term we use for those kind of projects or partnerships is the common customer model. So we developed this to address the need to get those long-term intensive services, and it basically, in the model, multiple agencies pitch in resources and services to create a more intensive level that any individual agency couldn't provide on their own. So our SNAP 50/50 program is an example of this. It brings together resources from a local funder, and I'll toss out an example and say, the city of Portland has a really high need for support for people who are at risk of eviction or homelessness. So homelessness is a top level issue. Employment is, of course, seen as one of the solutions for the homeless crisis in the Portland metro area. And the city of Portland puts funding into employment services. So that's one of the agencies in this common customer model. The SNAP E&T program provides the match funding from the city, investment made in employment services. And on top of that, we have WIOA one-stop services like scholarships for occupational training and so forth that are provided as a normal part of the WIOA one-stop system. So we bring all those things together and we start to have a kind of intensity and longevity and program design that can really serve the targeted population of food stamp recipients effectively here. The name of our program locally is called Career Boost. So I'll talk a little bit about Career Boost in terms of the background and funding. Career Boost comes from, so let me back up a moment. And for those of you that don't know, the 50/50 program requires a non-federal investment made into serving food stamp recipients, SNAP recipients, and that's matched with the 50/50 match that we've been talking about, and we can answer questions about that in the Q&A if there's interest. The funding that we have many little buckets of funding, but the big buckets of funding come from the city of Portland, as I mentioned, Multnomah County, which is one of the 2 counties that we serve, the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and the state of Oregon. We have a little bit of funding from local banks and foundations also. In total, it's about $1.6 million in local funding that's invested into this program, Career Boost, to serve SNAP recipients. Funding for from these sources goes into providing intensive career coaching, and as I mentioned, that's something that isn't available in the WIOA funded portion of the system. Occupational training and job placement services. So there are some kinds of specialized occupational training and placement services that are beyond the normal one-stop service. And I'll give an example of one of those on the next slide. The program is growing quickly. These are not easy to start. I think there's just a difference in terminology, definitions, bureaucracy, and so forth between FNS and WIOA, and it takes some time to understand how to implement these programs. So it's a slow start, but we feel like we're on a kind of hockey puck part of the curve and growing quickly. I wrote this slide just off recollection of how many partners, and we're up to 17. It's actually incorrect here. We have over 17 participating organizations in our Career Boost program, and Stacy will talk more about their roles and responsibilities. So here's just one example, and this is a little bit of an outlier. Generally, our programs are paying for career coaching, and that's someone who develops a career plan and works with the participant as a case manager. But this BankWorks is actually occupational training, and it's funded by local area banks. So we have around 10 banks that pay for an industry-developed, industry-led training for bank teller occupations. And the banks do this because their brick-and-mortar bank teller, the brick-and-mortar banks are really supported by populations like immigrants, people of color. They're supported by the same people that they're trying to train in these programs, so that the bank tellers and the folks working at the brick-and-mortar sites can represent the communities that they're serving. So we have funding for this industry-based training coming from banks. We work with Department of Human Services to recruit food stamp recipients to enter this training. So DHS is the agency that handles the food stamp program here in Oregon. And so they go through an intensive, I think it's around a 12-week training. And then there's a graduation that's held at a DHS office. And this is a group of graduates pictured here. On the graduation day, the banks who have been funding the training send their HR representatives, and there's a kind of hiring event. It's pretty normal to have 50 to 60% of the graduates have a job on the very same day they graduate. Those numbers of placements keep climbing after the program, but just on the graduation day, we have half of them or more normally with jobs coming out of that. So that's a really great partnership, and it benefits the banks. They want to diversify and have bank teller population that reflects the communities they serve. It benefits the FNS program because it's a really good training program. And one thing about the banking industry is that you don't need a college degree to move up into a very high level position within banking, and the teller occupations are the way in. And it's good for us. As I mentioned, we want to increase our partnerships with DHS, and we have a high number of food stamp recipients in the metro area. So an example of working together to provide a greater level of services through the one-stop system. So next is Stacy Triplett, our Community Programs Manager.
Thanks, Patrick. I was just going to delve into some of the programmatic aspects of the career coaching program that Patrick mentioned before. The umbrella under which these programs exist is economic opportunity programs. So you see that listed there, and there's multiple populations that are kind of focused on in the programs. As Patrick mentioned, there's 17 different partners that provide services in the Economic Opportunity Program, or we call it EOP, so I'll try not to do too many acronyms. There are culturally specific CBOs as well as others, and 5 America's Job Centers as well. So currently, thus far in the program year, there's about 450 residents who have been served by the Economic Opportunity Programs. Let me get into a few of the details around how the collaboration with the Career Boost aspect has helped those relationships that we have with community-based providers. So the network of community-based providers provides the one-on-one individualized career coaching, and the program that's grown was funded with local funding sources. So here we're trying to address how the funding scenarios have changed because we've started the implementation of Career Boost programs with the CBO network providing career coaching services for SNAP recipients. These programs created a partnership with agencies to grow capacity to serve customers receiving SNAP. It also helped, I think you can all relate to year-to-year uncertainty of funding being addressed by these developing new local sources. the community-based relationships that we built were built on a network of aligned partners. So there were multiple agencies who participated with the Career Coaching Network, either contracted directly for the Career Boost program, or there's some CBOs that are just affiliated with us or who are related through the WIOA system. So we were able to grow that system or grow that network and then diversify the funding that supports it. So I'll just dig into one specific thing that Patrick mentioned, the CDBG or the Community Block Grant Program, which is funding these career coaching agencies, and it is a federal source, so it sounds like maybe that shouldn't be used for the matching program, but since it is locally controlled, there's an exemption on it. And so our partners at Prosper Portland, who funded that first economic opportunity program under their charter to advance social equity, reduce poverty citywide, and make sure economic prosperity and employment opportunities are available to all residents, created the alignment to use that as a funding source for workforce development programs to be extended to SNAP recipients. So that created a stronger local partnership, and it is something that we were able to build on through the SNAP ENT program. So this is an example of how the partnership was strengthened because of our participation in SNAP ENT. I did want to highlight that it preceded the CDBG funding had been used for workforce development in the past, but this allowed us to grow that program and amplify the services for SNAP ENT. So I just want to get into what it looks like on the ground. This is a story that comes from Central City Concern, one of the agencies who is our partner in this. So I'm going to amplify the story a little bit as we go. A customer was referred to the program early March 2017 while they were living in a shelter. I just identify that this provider is aligned with local housing insecurity and homelessness system. And so that systems alignment helps us to wrap around the recruitment of SNAP recipients as well as providing additional housing support. So you'll see their main barrier was a need to find a job that would allow the use of a wheelchair. Their career coach referred them to vocational rehab due to physical limitations with the hopes of gaining other work supports and possibly electric wheelchair. The customer was very motivated to look for work. They state they struggled with depression about their circumstances and now is feeling hopeful because of all the assistance they received from Voc Rehab, the career coach, and I want to highlight here the Housing Hub Rental Assistance Team. So one aspect of the Economic Opportunity Program is that career coaches in the community-based organizations who provide career coaching are able to refer customers who have housing insecurity or who are on the continuum for housing assistance to short-term rent assistance, which is aligned with their engagement with the program. They're Career Boost customers who are actively pursuing employment and training, skills development, and they receive rent assistance in an aligned process with the short-term rent assistance. So this client in particular has years of experience in construction and operating a key-making kiosk. Their career coach assisted them in reaching the housing hub and now has been employed for 3 months. They recently won a customer service award at Home Depot. So this is what we see as far as results when we were able to grow the community-based network using SNAP ENT, and you see the alignment of all the different involved parties here. So let's talk a little bit about benefits. While it was a rigorous implementation and it did require higher administrative capacity to be built within our community-based organization, so there's 12 of them who are participating as well as the America Job Centers, it was aligned with where we were currently building partnerships with the community-based organization. So we found that while it was rigorous to implement, now we're seeing the benefits. So I don't know if you want to chime in on benefits for the workforce boards.
Yeah, I'll cover the boards. So one of the main benefits is it brings in additional resources to enable intensive more intensive services. So that's something that I think it really matches what Julie said about the, the background here is that we pitch in some and we have some expertise. We work with our DHS and they pitch in some and have some expertise. And we also have some local non-federal funding and community-based partners that pitch in resources and expertise. And bringing those things together, we can serve more varied population. Another thing is that, if you're involved in WIOA, you know that there's a vision of bringing core partners to work together. And the food stamp and TANF programs are both part of the intended collaboration within the one-stop system. And it's a really strong collaboration. Being involved in this is not the only front that we work with those programs, but it's created a lot of progress and momentum in pushing forward the vision of WIOA. Also, it can be used to leverage new local resources in addition to the match. So thinking about the match resources, and I think ours is at a run rate of about $500,000 at present, but I think in the next program year we'll reach 700,000 or so. But thinking of only the match is missing part of the opportunity, because in the context we pursue this, we will go, for example, to the city and say, employment is a really important part of addressing homelessness. It's got to be that people who want to pursue career track employment and who are homeless or in shelters should be given the opportunity, and that helps everyone all the way around. So we receive city funding for that. And if we can bring a program that matches federal funding for the city's investment, it creates a stronger case for that funding. So it's leveraging in two directions there. So the match isn't the only way to think about additional resources to make more impact in your community. And then the last thing is that it really increases our partnerships with community-based organizations. We've always had some relationships with CBOs, but as we've built out and for example, moved into serving homeless people and people being evicted, now we're working more with housing partners, and we have access to rent assistance, as Stephanie mentioned, and that's more of a orbit of community-based organizations rather than public agencies and community colleges and so forth. And it just broadens the team environment and broadens the resources and services when you connect with more of the community-based organizations.
And to speak for the community agencies, the dozen who are currently working on this, they see that there's a deeper alignment with what Patrick was mentioning. What are the funding sources that are available for this program? But more than that, how are our shared customers getting access to additional services from the America Job Center side or from the WIOA funded services? So we're seeing a lot more of that type of system level cross referral or just accessing additional services due to the closeness that we're working on and due to the very close alignment that we need to keep our services aligned. So I think that's what we have for our example from Portland, Oregon. Now you'll hear from Lynn and Nola in Minnesota, and they'll share their experience. Thanks very much. I skipped one important thing. I'm sorry. We have something queued up for your participation so that you can think about these funding sources that you have in your local area. Here, we're going to do a quick poll, if we can get that pulled up. The poll will, it kind of lumps some of the funding sources together, but what we thought might be nice is to spend a few moments, and this will be live for you to answer. Spend a few moments thinking about what sources might be used in your own area to do a program as we've described. So for us, we've seen everything from the employer contribution that Patrick mentioned around BankWorks and local banks. We've seen state level lottery funds, private foundations helped us on that systems alignment work that I was referring to about the aligning short-term rent assistance and employment services. We've seen social venture funds. I mentioned the CDBG program or community development block grants and how they have been used in the program. There's state funds, You might have your local economic development agencies supporting you. So all of those things, perhaps we can make the poll live so that you can click on all of the sources that you might be able to use in your area to create a similar focus on SNAP recipients. So I think we'll just have a few more moments for you to click on those answers, as many as you have there. The child care supports that we're referring to here as a program of demonstration that we're doing with our local DHS. So hopefully you'll have enough time. I'll go ahead and count it down now. Keep clicking and voting. I'll close it out in 10, 9, 8. Get those last votes in. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see if we can get the results of what people thought might be local sources or locally controlled sources of funding. All right, well, I'm not sure if the results are coming on here.
Stacy, this is David from SGI, so I can read the results out for everybody.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
So yeah, sure. So we have 79% state or local government funds, 67% employer or private foundation grants or contributions, 29% social venture funds, 63% economic development or housing agency funding, and 49% child care supports.
Well, that's great. So that's where you look to build the programs and build the partnerships you need. So now I should do what I was supposed to do at the end here, is introduce Lynn and Nola from Minnesota, who will share their experiences, and also mention that there's a video link and a report on the housing and employment system alignment work that we referred to that will be sent to you after this webinar on your email. Thanks very much.
Greetings. My name is Lynn Dawn. Let's see if I can make the slide move. I can. Okay, so my name is Lynn Dawn. I'm the Minnesota SNAP ENT Program Coordinator and Liaison between the Department of Human Services and the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. With me today is Nola Spicer, the Workforce Development Director with Hennepin County. Our portion of this presentation will primarily focus on the work being done at the local level. So today we will be discussing the various ways Minnesota has begun integrating WIOA adults with SNAP ENT and adult career pathways. We will start by looking at Minnesota's SNAP ENT mission, vision, and priorities. We will move on to discussing referrals and co-enrollment and some of the system changes we have had to make. We will show examples of the SNAP ENT, adult career pathways, and WIOA activity crosswalks, and discuss the next steps the state is undertaking in regards to co-enrollment. The vision, mission, and priorities were created in partnership with the Department of Human Services, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, Hennepin and Ramsey counties, community-based organizations such as Hired and Project for Pride in Living, through our work with the Seattle Jobs Initiative SNAP to Skills program. Minnesota envisions a SNAP employment and training program where Minnesotans with low incomes have clear pathways in developing marketable and in-demand skills, leading to career advancement and self-sufficiency. Through strong partnerships, our mission is to help recipients fully utilize their SNAP benefits, gain the essential skills needed for gainful employment, and successfully transition off of public assistance. The vision and mission guide the work of our priorities. In turn, our priorities guide our strategic plan. This being said, our priorities are: develop a continuum of evidence-based employment and training services through our partnerships, make available services that are responsive to participants' needs, motivation, culture, and abilities, build a range of support services to help participants succeed, work inclusively with our diverse partners and employers, share progress publicly as we work aggressively but thoughtfully to grow SNAP ENT to serve recipients. Nola Spicer will now discuss referrals, co-enrollment, and how integration is taking place in the field.
Greetings. In order to achieve the SNAP Employment and Training mission, vision, and priorities in Minnesota, we have recognized the need to leverage existing funding sources, to create and sustain partnerships, and to identify ways to align policies where possible. This work is primarily done through the scope of career pathways. The chart you are looking at is a simple walkthrough of how a co-enrollment in SNAP Employment and Training and WIOA could occur in Minnesota. Typically, individuals walk into a workforce center or one-stop looking to receive general services or to learn more about a career pathway program. At this point, an individual would meet with an employment counselor to discuss their goals and to begin determining eligibility of applicable programs. The employment counselor will identify what services, if any, the individual is currently receiving. If the individual is not receiving public assistance, the employment counselor may recommend using the Minnesota Bridge to Benefits tool. This is an online tool that helps individuals determine potential eligibility for public assistance programs. Through this process, the employment counselor could make a reverse referral into SNAP Employment and Training. The Career Pathway program contains bridge programming. This is where programming conducted in partnership with adult basic education using contextualized education and where applicable, GED and/or alternative high school diploma are provided. The Career Pathway program contains an industry-recognized credential and employability skills to ensure competitiveness in the workforce. In this model, multiple funding sources are utilized. Such funds include state dollars, adult basic education dollars, WIOA adult, etc. The state dollars and the WIOA adult program can be used to fund assessment, training, job search, job placement, and support services. These dollars are allocated based on the individual's needs as noted in an employment plan. The SNAP Employment and Training Program could provide services such as assessment, basic employability skills, and job search activities. The role of the navigator is critical to this design. It is up to this person to identify and coordinate services, assist with job search and retention. This individual also has great employer connections to ensure the design and credential match the needs of the local labor market. Career pathways are a strategy that Minnesota will implement in order to reduce racial disparities in education and employment, to provide greater opportunity for all Minnesotans, and to build employer-led industry sector partnerships focusing on aligning skills with careers in demand. Minnesota's workforce development system is designed in such a way that allows for local control. This being said, in various regions throughout the state, the provider of WIOA programs is also the provider of our TANF and SNAP employment training programs. This gives us an advantage to serving individuals in these multiple programs. Here in Hennepin County, we manage the SNAP Employment and Training Program and also house the WIOA Local Board, which oversees the WIOA efforts in suburban Hennepin and Carver counties. We are directly responsible for the implementation of WIOA Title 1B program, which is the Dislocated Worker, Adult, and Youth. This design is intended to be as smooth as possible, meaning we eliminate duplication in steps along the way in order to reduce programmatic barriers for the participant. For example, agencies establish data sharing agreements and common application processes to reduce the paperwork a participant may have to complete. The benefit of the design above is the ability to use the limited resources in each of the individual silos while creating a robust set of services available to the participant. Because our system is structured through the silo approach, Lynn is going to walk us through some of the details that we needed to address in order to achieve this work.
Thank you. As we began working on co-enrollments, the first obstacle was the management information system. In Minnesota, our system is called Workforce One. In the past, community-based organizations and SNAP E&T employment counselors needed to have the county SNAP eligibility office generate a referral from another data system called Maxis. This was so the employment counselor could open and enroll a participant in Workforce One. As of April of this year, employment counselors no longer need the county eligibility office to generate a SNAP referral. Community-based organizations and employment counselors are now able to create their own participant records in Workforce One. The change eased the complexity of opening and enrolling participants in Workforce One. This has expedited the process of enrolling eligible participants into appropriate employment and training programs in Workforce One. Once Workforce One was changed, we provided a SNAP E&T user guide to assist employment counselors with how to create person records, open activities, track support services, and track or enter other case management requirements in Workforce One. We also then went out and provided technical assistance to the providers to ensure that the enrollments and data entry are completed accurately. In addition, the Workforce One staff offers trainings on the functionality of the system for any new employment counselors that are hired on. Next is an example of the activities crosswalk that was created to help employment counselors understand how to identify appropriate and similar activities within each program. Each program has been set up by different offices, so there are different activity options within each program. With the crosswalk, it creates ease of access to complete data entry into multiple programs for co-enrollment. The different departments continue to work to align options available in each program. So this is the activities crosswalk. The SNAP E&T components in our state plan are job search, retention, self-employment training, work fair, work experience, job search training, and educational programs. Over the years, we have recognized the importance of assisting our providers in understanding the opportunities available through co-enrollment, but also providing resources that go into the weeds in order to not only conceptually understand it, but to connect the details as well. The chart you are looking at is a snapshot into our activities crosswalk. This crosswalk starts on the left with the work experience component in SNAP E&T. However, in Workforce One case management system, we have numerous activities listed for each program available. This being said, the work experience component could be captured as paid work experience in both SNAP E&T and adult career pathways, but then is noted as staff-assisted job placement in the WIOA adult program. These activities are in silos per state or federal program, therefore are not streamlined. This crosswalk helps a navigator or employment counselor understand how to accurately note the services a participant is receiving. Let's look at another SNAP E&T component and the corresponding SNAP E&T activities. Adult career pathways in WIOA adult activities that can be found in Workforce One. Here the component is educational programs. Under the SNAP column, you'll see the activity classroom training. In adult career pathways, classroom training is credentialed coursework training. And under WIOA, there are 3 possible activities, those being classroom training, customized training, and incumbent worker training. If you look at the SNAP activity of ESL, ELL, it is the same activity under adult career pathways. While WIOA adult does not have that activity, the activity they do have available is ESL activity. The activity crosswalk breaks each SNAP component into the specific activities under the specific program. It makes it easier for the employment counselor to co-enroll a participant into various programs. NOLA will now talk about the Minnesota Adult Career Pathways Partnership and one of the subcommittees that has been formed to move forward with this work.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to jump back up into the state level work in regards to where we want to go. We've worked on a lot of details. We work with providers in trying to understand the complexities of each of these systems to streamline processes and create effective procedures to move forward. As you can see in Minnesota, we've identified ways to co-enroll, the technical assistance, but there's still a lot of work to do. And there are still a lot of misconceptions about if and when participants can be co-enrolled in these various programs. The required skill level to understand how co-enrollment can occur is high. This being said, and for these reasons, the Minnesota Governor's Workforce Development Board established a committee called the Career Pathways Partnership. The purpose of this committee was to establish leadership and operations to support career pathways. In order to do this, they established a subcommittee that will focus solely on co-enrollment. This referral or co-enrollment subcommittee will focus on policy and system alignment. The committee seeks to understand the program policy changes needed to achieve greater alignment that will support a stronger and broader engagement of systems in building the career pathways. The goals of this committee are to review the data from the WIOA titles Co-Enrollment Project Report, to determine the need to match data with other programs such as Vocational Rehabilitation Services, SNAP Employment and Training, and MFIP, which is Minnesota's TANF program. To interpret WIOA regulations in regards to referrals and co-enrollment, to identify and promote the benefits of a strong referral and co-enrollment system, to identify local referral co-enrollment best practices, to research national referral and co-enrollment best practices, and to disseminate these practices across all partners. We are very excited to see how the work at the local level has risen to the level of the Governor's Workforce Development Board. Here at Hennepin County, we are exploring ways to create a toolkit with our providers that can be used as a guideline for understanding the complexities of serving individuals across multiple programs. The toolkit and the work at the state board should complement each other well and serve as a great platform for the future of workforce development programming in the state of Minnesota.
And with that, that's the end of our presentation.
All right, thanks so much, Patrick, Stacy, Lynn, and Nola. So we're going to turn to your questions shortly, but just quickly before that, we wanted to leave you with a couple of things to consider as you approach these partnerships. Sorry, let's go. So these guiding questions include: who are your shared priority clients and what outcomes are you and your partner both trying to achieve? And what current issues, or you might call them pain points, are you grappling with that these partnerships could help solve? What services do your shared clients currently receive from the workforce system, and what additional services could help improve the odds of them finding jobs leading to self-sufficiency? What other partners beyond AJCs and the SNAP E&T program need to be involved to deliver comprehensive, individualized, intensive services? These might include employers, community colleges, and community-based organizations. Do any of these potential partners offer opportunities to leverage non-federal funds through SNAP E&T 50/50 reimbursement agreements? Patrick mentioned that we really are not taking time on this call to explain what those are in depth, but there are many resources on the SNAP Skills website, including policy briefs, webinars, and other materials that dive into what those kinds of 50/50 agreements look like and what they can accomplish. Finally, beyond these guiding questions, I think state and local experience to date suggests that one key to successful partnerships is for the SNAP agency to set clear expectations for the E&T services to be provided through the workforce system, including what the needs of SNAP participants in each region are, how they can best be served, and how E&T funds can expand the kinds of services available to improve outcomes. And in setting those expectations, it's especially important not to lose sight of the particular needs of individuals who face multiple barriers to employment. We're now going to open up the discussion for your questions, which David Katz is going to moderate. David?
Okay, thanks, Julie, and thanks to all our speakers. So we have plenty of time for some Q&A. So if you look at your control panel, there is a question section there. You can go ahead and type in your question, and we'll try to get to as many or maybe all the questions depending on how many we get. If you have a question for a specific panelist, go ahead and type that into your question just so we know who to address it to. Or if it's open to everybody, that's fine as well. So we have our first question. Somebody would like further clarification to the statement that WIOA doesn't cover intensive career coaching. I believe that is directed to our work systems folks. Again, someone would like further clarification to the statement that WIOA does not cover intensive career coaching.
Yeah, this is Patrick from Portland. This is not true of WIOA broadly. It's true of Oregon's implementation of WIOA. So we, in Oregon, don't use the WIOA funds to support WIOA case management. That said, we're unusual across states in terms of WIOA implementation. So the answer is that WIOA can and usually does. But in Oregon, we don't fund WIOA case managers, and we direct the WIOA funds into training scholarships, workshops, courses, pre-vocational courses for people, things like that. And so how that relates to the SNAP 50/50 program is that we are able to bring in other kinds of resources like the city funds that I mentioned and that Stacy talked about to provide that intensive employment coaching and career coaching. Because people coming in, particularly people with, who receive food stamps, they need that more intensive long-term service model. So by working with other kinds of programs like SNAP 50/50 and other agency partners like City of Portland and A Home for Everyone, our housing agency, we're able to bring back the intensive career coaching and other kinds of services.
Okay, great.
This
Thanks,
is
Patrick.
Julie. I just wanted to add, obviously there's a lot of variation regionally and locally, so, your own experience may differ, but in general, I think the experience across the workforce system has been that, given a mandate to provide universal services to job seekers and employers and limited funding, it's, not that easy always for the WIOA system to do very intensive, long-term, individualized case management. So I think that's partly where, where that observation comes from as well. But of course, your own experience may be different.
Okay, great. We have a couple questions related to whether the presentation and the PowerPoint are going to be made available, and the answer is yes, we will be making the recording as well as the PowerPoint available shortly after, and everybody will be getting a link to those, so you'll be able to get those. We have a question for the staff in Minnesota. With the ability to create a referral for SNAP participants, how do you determine if they're eligible for the program? Do you access a system that provides the information?
When creating the person record in the Workforce One system, the employment counselor would go into the MAXIS system, which is the eligibility system on the financial side, and verify the eligibility at that time. They would also verify the eligibility on a monthly basis if they were looking for any types of reimbursement for that participant, just to verify.
Okay, great. And Lynn, we have, I think, a related question. With partnering, how do you manage data and confidentiality concerns, especially between partners in different locations?
With the records that are in Workforce One, unless access has been granted to get into the detail, all you can see is a shell of the record so that you know the person is enrolled somewhere else, and then you can get a release so that you can share information. But the system limits who has access and what access to what information based on privileges that are established when the worker gets access to the system. Does that answer your question?
I think that's a good answer. So we have a question Not sure who this is directed to. What plans are there and what's work to minimize the cliff effect? So presumably when it's referring to when people start earning, they may start losing some of their benefits. Does anybody have an answer to that one?
We can try to take a stab at that from Portland. And I think you're talking about the safety net cliff, the benefits net cliff. And this applies to other kinds of benefits like housing. We do a lot of work with housing, obviously, and when you get someone out of public housing, there's a huge cliff because they're losing that subsidy and that security. And the same applies to food stamps and so forth. So some of it is just the kind of common customer model and just a fancy way of saying different agencies work together to provide the necessary supports. So when we're serving a low-income, let's say a parent of dependent children, that's become a concern that's increasing for us because we've got grant resources, and low-income households with children are very adversely affected by poverty. It's intergenerational, and even when we have training funding, it's hard for those families to participate because the cost of childcare is so high. In Oregon, it might be the top or second highest cost in the nation. It's very high up there. But wherever you are, it's high for a low-income household. So we, in these programs, bring together housing partners that support the cost of housing if someone's in training and being evicted, or if they're starting a job and the early wages don't completely cover the household needs. We're starting a pilot to bring in childcare support that will pay for the cost of a household with dependent children who are going into training. And that wasn't possible before, to go into a 3-month training and then take a job where you're not quite earning yet what's necessary to cover the cost of the childcare and your household costs. That's what the cliff is. So we're working with childcare partner to bring the childcare support in for a year after the job starts. Generally we do the employment piece of that, obviously, and the occupational training and employer engagement piece of that. But it just takes the alignment of the different resources around the customer rather than the customer having to go around to the different systems, and doesn't work well. It counter incentivizes and it creates safety net cliffs when those different public agency partners working together. So we call it common customer model. It's just operationally integrated type of collaboration to make sure the people you're serving are supported all the way through to where they can get into a middle skills occupation is the goal.
Great, thanks, Patrick. So I have another question for you guys. Before I ask it, I just encourage anybody else to type in their questions. We have plenty of time, so if you haven't asked your question yet, now's a good time to do so. So Patrick and Stacy, there's a question. Can you talk more about your case management data system?
I'll take a stab at that, and maybe Stacy can follow. So I think we're a little bit unique. It might not be applicable for everyone, but we run the WIOA WIB tracking database across the state of Oregon, not just for our region. And we have a data share with the state system for the Wagner-Pizer part of the system, so that we've really got a strong backbone in terms of employment database. We for customers coming into the one-stop system. We extend that database access to our partners involved in the SNAP 50/50 and other programs. So the career coaches, we provide training to them. Their agencies enter into data sharing agreements. The data sharing agreements apply not only to WIOA, which we manage in our database, but the state agency data, which they get because the data is linked in our database. So everybody is able to see the data for the participant that is their customer. So again, it's a common customer. They get to see the data for their customers, but not every customer in the database. And so it's just data share and building it out to be collaborative. The database generally covers scheduling of activities, whether or not clients showed up, covers performance, activities, and so forth. And we've developed ours to track the 50/50 components that are define the activities in the SNAP ENT grant.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. So I have a question for all of you. We have most likely some state SNAP agency folks on the line, as well as some workforce system folks on the line. Do you guys have any recommendations for those who may not be as far along in terms of partnering with SNAP ENT and WIOA? Like, how did you guys, if you can think back, get started and starting to really integrate these programs, and what recommendations would you have to the agencies to sort of reach out to one another to actually start to build a better partnership?
I'll take another shot at it, and Stacy also. You know, we were talking on mute here, just kind of remembering the whole process of this grant. And it's kind of like starting a train from the stopped. You know, it just doesn't go fast right away. And I think maybe the first 6 months, it was just all planning, very little activity, even though we thought we'd have it, because it just different world of definitions, compliance, reporting, and so forth, and partnerships that needed to be developed. So, but once that momentum is going, it's moving along much more quickly. Again, I think, you know, if you look at the scale of our program, it's on the hockey stick part of the curve. So the advice would be, you know, understand it's going to start slow. There's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done, both in terms of partnerships and the kind of bureaucracy that needs to be set up, tracking, reporting, compliance, all of those things. So plan for that, but it's been well worthwhile to us. I mean, it's tremendous, and it has really helped in terms of our relationship to SNAP ENT program, to the DHS offices and system, and there's just a much higher degree of collaboration there, and I think that's going to continue. And to local government agencies like the City of Portland, our ECDEV partners, who, as Stacy mentioned, do have an interest in equity and helping low-income residents to stay in the neighborhoods. So it's been a slow start, but it's moving quickly now, and you know, just plan for that kind of trajectory, but know it's worthwhile.
Right. I would just add that looking around for those shared alignments will help you as you go through the implementation, because the amount of planning was kind of unfamiliar for most of the partners at the table, and it did require a little bit of iteration. Let's see how we can work together on this part. How can this best be addressed? And so having the long-term goal in mind, that these are common customers and that they can be served in a more aligned and more targeted fashion, was what kept everybody at the table, even when things like administrative capacities to measure or to use the data system in a certain way kind of had to, you know, we had to go around that. That got in the way at first, and we had to just keep going at it until we could each report on the things that we needed to report on. So I just give you encouragement to keep going.
Great. Thanks, Patrick and Stacy. Nola and Lynn, do you guys have a thought on that? Sort of concrete steps to get partnership going?
Yeah, so this is Nola. I would say while we were also on mute, thinking through how we did start in the beginning, and then thinking through what would have potentially worked better. The way that our collaboration started in Minnesota, I would say, was near being forced. There was a lot of discourse happening in the state with regards to needing to serve the ABOD population better than what we had been serving them. So that required then the two state agencies to work more collaboratively together. And I would say where it really became a success was when the two state agencies were able to stop looking through this work through the lens of needing to be everything for everyone. and recognizing that at Deed, where I previously worked, that we didn't have to be the rock stars in employment. It's okay to share that space with SNAP Employment and Training, which was being housed at DHS. And so I think letting our guards down right away from the beginning and saying, okay, we do have a problem in the state. So really identifying, first of all, why do we need to work together, to then get to the how. Having data at the table, also the characteristics of the populations that were being served. So we could say, you know, at WIOA, we also can serve a similar population that SNAP Employment and Training serves. There is overlap. How do we work in that overlap better and then grow from there? And I would say it goes back to the days where we were doing fast track programming. It was a career pathway model where we were really trying to focus hard on the same population of individuals as we're talking about with SNAP Employment and Training, but it wasn't work that got embedded into the two systems. And we were able to take a lot of work from the local level and start changing our policies at the state level, start changing the data systems at the state level. So finding that common mission, vision, and purpose to then grow the work into those very concrete and tangible goals and starting to achieve them and having those small wins and recognizing the small wins. Because there's going to be more challenges than wins in the beginning.
Great. Thanks, Nell. I appreciate that. We have a question that's related to this, and the question is, does anybody have an MOU template or other partnership document that they'd be willing to share to help them understand how the partnership looks on paper?
In Minnesota, we can take a look at what we have that can share. I'm not sure that everything is as structured with regards to the partnerships at the state level or at the local level. I feel it's been more of a collaborative work environment. But we do have some MOUs. We do have an interagency agreement between the two state agencies that's a transfer of funds. So we'd have to just take a look at and see what we have to see if it's applicable for sharing.
Okay. Well, we can follow up on that if there is anything to share for the participant in the webinar who asked that question. We'll let you know. And I believe that is our last question. We'll give it one more minute here, 30 seconds, if anybody wants to type in something quickly. Okay. Nothing seems to be coming through. So I believe we are done. That concludes this webinar. We really appreciate everybody joining us, and a special thanks to all our presenters for taking the time to share with us today. Again, we'll make this webinar available to everybody, both the recording as well as the PowerPoint, so you should see that in your email fairly shortly. Thanks again, and we'll conclude the webinar.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, David.